This land is your land, and this land is my land, from the California to the New York Island.
So we will call this meeting to order of Cupop at 6:04 p.m. We currently do not have quorum, but should shortly. So we will not discuss the minutes until we do have quorum. Javier is on his way. So I think we're going to, actually, Tim, I'm going to jump to you. Rob Klee is not able to attend this evening. He is teaching a class that was rescheduled from yesterday. So Tim, you are our ex officio member report, the sole report for this evening.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I just have one item and maybe one other point. The shareable item is the Conservation Commission has continued our work on the properties worthy of preservation effort. And those are properties that are worth the town being aware of, that they would be good properties for open space for a variety of reasons, including wetland preservation, historical preservation, recreational areas, and other reasons. We are about to undertake the reviewing of the town-owned properties, which are worthy of preservation from the conservation point of view, and we will so we thank you for your work, because we will be using your recently constructed list to perform that review over the next couple months. And that's the only item, because we really did focus pretty much our whole meeting on that this past month. The other point, as long as I have the floor, is we had a long time ago, when you first started up your consideration of the Cupop town-owned property list, we had suggested that you consider, and I think there was agreement on this, the easements that exist, and adding them as another, finding a way to add them to the list so the town could keep track of those, since they represent an interest of the town. And I believe at that time we were going to wait until the list was complete, which it is now, and you would like to ask when that's going to be taken up again, especially since you're getting ready to go to the Board of Selectmen, and they would probably be interested that if you do add them on, that's now something that's being tracked. So we'll just leave that as a question.
So I have two questions about your first point, and then I can answer the second point. So would you like me to answer the second point first and then ask the questions in any particular order?
Your pleasure.
Okay, all right. Regarding the easements, I think, I agree. I mean, it would be nice to somehow track the easements. I think part of our discussion, though, was that it was pretty difficult to locate all the easements, short of going through every single property in the town of Woodbridge, which we don't really have the manpower to do. I mean, I'm 100% on board that as they become known to us, to be able to somehow track those easements, especially ones that the town has an easement, right? Because we are the town-owned property. So I would ask if there's known easements, that I think we do have a list of known easements. I believe you did provide it to Javier.
Yeah, and that would be my point. That
right.
We should start with what we know.
What we know, and then
and going through,
right.
No one wants to send that task to anyone to go through all the deeds in town, and that's, as we trip upon them, we should identify them. So I think we have 8 or so, I don't know the number, that I've sent over by email a couple months ago, I think. I come across again the list, and then the other suggestion, which I'll just bring up again, was to since that's being done, I would send out a query to the send that list to the people who have been town staff for a number of years and see if they know of anything else, and just ring the bell and see if it, brings anything to mind. And then you leave it until some other things are added. But I think just keeping track of those, because those were not known.
Good idea.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
and it's a very, very huge task to try to
Yeah.
figure out who owns what on what property.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as we go through, I mean, exactly, I mean, that's my thoughts exactly. I mean, it is quite the task to have somebody go through every property in town, so as we know them, we should have some kind of a database. I'm wondering if, however, because the list is very particular regarding our charge on what goes on our list, perhaps we start a second list, right, that is an easement list. Because this charge is very specific, right, like categories 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, but we can certainly deal with with the manner in which we house the list at a later date, but certainly.
Certainly, we were
Right.
leaving how you did it.
Right.
I wouldn't.
Well, with all the
I-
new sale properties, what you could also do is see if they have easements. And if they don't, you put down no easement,
Right.
so that
Yeah.
we don't have to
But-
go back and look at it.
Yeah.
So that's
The
definitely something
positive.
we can look into for
I-
sure.
I would say, though, on your charter, it does, the charter says you should keep track of properties in 4 categories. And you should, and you have, and you will. It doesn't preclude that you add a 5th category. That's not
No,
mandated
there's
by
no
charter.
preclusion, right,
And-
right,
And,
so.
and I think I would express to the board that this perhaps was an oversight when this was done, that this is another category of property that's different than the others in a lot of ways, but probably should be kept track of, and that's.
Well, that should be put on our 2024 to-do list for one of our projects, is to look and see what easements the town of Woodbridge has within the town, right? And then try to incorporate that somehow into the
Well,
list.
those are the ones that
Right,
I had emailed, I think, to
Right.
you and Javier and Allison.
and I'm sure there's
if I
more
recall.
too. I'm sure there's a lot, but we'll start
There
with
could
that.
be, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that could be on our to-do list, Tony, for
Yeah.
our projects for
Yeah.
2024.
And just the final point, I mean, it just popped to my mind, I didn't say names before when I was saying town officials, but you would think that Jerry Weiner, having been here a good number of years, and during the time he was town council, and he was involved in the town before this, in fact, I think he was on Cupop, if I recall.
Not on not,
No, but
When it was first created.
when it was first created.
when it was first created, maybe,
but-
yeah.
So got familiarity with land and so forth. But he would have probably, all easements would have probably while he was town council, would have passed by him. So he may be a good one to pick his brain.
Thank you. So we'll put that down as one of our projects. And great, thanks, Tim. And my questions, so going back to my original
yeah.
questions for the list. So the list of properties that conservation, I want to use your word, worthy of preservation, right? So
Yeah.
the properties that you have on your list, you've gone through privately owned properties. I saw that for properties that you've identified worthy of preservation. And then you're subsequently going to be looking at town-owned properties. And I just wanted to make sure in terms of, what we're doing, and and you're aware of this because you've been here, but we plan on going through all the properties in category 3 and, inviting when applicable, right, specific agencies, commissions, committees, et cetera, and to gain their input towards particular properties on that list. So I'm assuming, and I don't want to make an assumption, but I'm assuming that based on that, if one of the properties comes up that's on your list worthy of preservation, that, you representing conservation or someone from conservation will come and explain
Yeah.
what your position is on that property, why you feel it should remain open space versus somebody else coming in and
Yeah,
saying we want to build a basketball court or something.
Yeah, our list will cite a reason, the key reason for preservation. There typically are many reasons, And I should have said, I meant to say, and I didn't, once we finish that list, we will be sharing it,
Okay.
and that will be our recommendations.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. All right. That answered my question, so thanks.
Good. Yep.
I did go out of order, but we got those great. Thank you, Tim. Any questions for Tim, or are we ready to move on? Hi, Laura.
Hi,
Okay.
how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks.
All right, so we do have quorum now, so I can jump to number 2, which was the minutes review. So Tony did email the minutes out to everyone. Did everyone have the opportunity to review? And is there a motion on the floor regarding the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's unanimous, thank you. My chair report and update. I really do not have much to report today, so I'll keep it brief. A lot of what we have to discuss is under number 6 on our agenda, so I'm really going to defer any comments to number 6. As we are aware, from what my understanding is, we are not moving forward with a discussion on the country club for the latest Board of Selectmen meeting, so that opened us up to being able to start with our list of Category 3 properties, and as a group, collectively, we decided it would be best to discuss the properties that are listed under number 6. So we will get to that in one moment, but now that Javier is here, not to put you under the gun and make you run around here, but we have been asked to present to the Board of Selectmen. Laura, I know you weren't with us at the last meeting. We were asked to present our list to Board of Selectmen, and they were very interested in the amount of properties under Category 3 that do not have any restrictions, right? So we are in the process of creating a presentation, and the easiest way to present it to them, obviously our list is online. We will provide a hard copy to them at the meeting, but we figured that another way to do it, and I'm going to defer to Javier, who's trying to quickly unpack all of his items.
I mean,
But we did
it's
discuss.
6:16 and I just got off the phone with them like 7. And that
I'm
was
very
impressive.
impressed. I am impressed. But and the best way to do it. So Javier, can you remind me from the last meeting, the best way that we thought it would be to present this? Were we going to do the map with the pins? I think we were doing the pins with the properties.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that's the best way to do it, do you think, of all the unrestricted properties under Category 3?
So what we can do, I thought we agreed to last time, was we would give them a map, kind of a large area view, with an appendix of some details. You know, the map would have like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the corresponding details of those properties as an appendix to that little, almost like a little booklet. It doesn't have to be overly, complicated or detailed, but just the things that we think as a commission are salient to present to them to consider.
Okay, and so we think it's best not to do something like this, but rather a booklet kind of
I mean, we
presentation?
In my opinion, we could do both. Like, we could have an overhead thing just to give them the bird's eye view.
Right,
And that way, if anyone has any questions about where exactly is this, then we can show them in real time.
Right. If we
On the
do it
board.
digitally, then we could just project.
and leave them with a hard copy of
Yeah.
it and say review at your leisure, but here's the presentation.
Yes, I have to do that. I'm
Here are the
sorry.
properties, because I think at last count I kept saying 44, but I believe we're over 44.
No, we just said last. I'm gonna double check.
Yeah, I think we're almost at 50, right?
We had vacant, no restrictions. I started a separate tab. I have 48 Category 3 properties.
Okay. So, that meeting, Tony, is, what's the date of that meeting? The second Wednesday of October, is that correct?
Yes. It's usually the second Wednesday of
Okay.
October.
This is the presentation to
To the Board of Selectmen.
the board.
So whomever wants to come. Obviously, I need someone who knows how to do the computer, so that's one of
okay.
you guys.
As far as I know, it's October 11th.
Okay.
Wait, hold, please. October 11th is the next Cupop meeting.
No,
That's
Board of
the Board of
Selectmen.
Selectmen. Okay, I I have to check my calendar, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, I think the same thing. So I'm going to see if they can kind of pinpoint where, I mean, we'll see the agenda, right? So if we're at the beginning or the end type of thing, so we don't, need to be there for the 3-hour meeting or however long these meetings have been.
Does Jerry know that you're planning to present? So
Yeah,
you
this
might-
was-
You might ask her if, she could probably tell you, or if you.
You could
maybe
ask
she
her to
could
be put in
position
the
you in
beginning.
the
Yeah.
beginning, like speak with her about it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let me know what's better for you, beginning or end. Probably beginning.
What time is
What
it?
time do they start?
What time do they start?
Usually
I think the board of
5, right?
selectmen's 5, yeah.
At 5?
So like at opening,
Oh, yeah, I already have it.
At opening,
like at opening.
like we're the starting act?
Yes, like I need
Okay.
to open their show and then slowly fade away because it is my son's birthday and I also have somewhere that I have to be at 6.
Yes.
Well, happy birthday.
All right, so,
He's turning 11 on the 11th, it's a big one.
That's a big one.
It's the golden birthday.
so can you go too, Javier, or no?
Yes, yeah, I
Okay,
should
and
be able to
you
make
guys
it.
be able to go if we're there
I'll
at
try,
5?
yeah.
So what I'll do is I will talk to
And-
Jerry
Right.
Shaw, and I will try to get us at the beginning of the meeting, and then we will try to make this short and to the point, just point out, the categories, the changes that were made. We have to go through all of them, just say there were changes made, and the category 3, which is what they were really interested in, and really were kind of, I don't want to use a word flabbergasted, but were shocked that there were so many properties without restrictions under category 3. So, we will do our PIN presentation, right?
Yes,
Or
I
plan.
will have the map, I will do the map.
Okay. All right, so if you guys would like to come, I'd love to have everybody there and,
We'll try.
support.
I mean,
and
I'll
if you
try.
can't, don't worry about
Yeah.
it,
I have something at 6:30, but I can go at 5.
Okay, great.
No problem.
Yeah,
All right.
5 I could be here at 5.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so I'll talk to Jerry about that, okay? And I will send an email around about that, all right? Any questions about number 5 on the agenda? Okay, moving on to number 6. I do apologize, as I was saying to Patty earlier, I know that we had planned on, I was going to plan a special meeting for us to look at these properties in person, but I was not available for the last month. I was ill, so I do apologize for that. So that being said, however, I did find some information. I did obtain, and for Laura, for your benefit, we decided to, when looking at these properties under category 3, there are these properties that are listed here that actually are restricted for single-family homes. So just to recap, so that was actually listed in the deed, and although we put them on our unrestricted list, it's still properties that should be reviewed in light of the fact that they were deeded to the town for single-family homes. So, that being said, we felt that it was easiest to review these properties first and see where we are with that, at which point we will then open it up for, discussion, things of that nature, with the public. Steps for looking at category 3 property classifications for these properties. I did obtain the TPZ regulations from Christine Sullivan, because one concern I had was the acreage for some of these properties being 1.41, et cetera, right? And given it appears, and I was hoping that Rob would be here, but I will certainly follow up on this with Jerry Weiner if necessary, or Christine Sullivan again, but from what I understand, these properties would still be able to be utilized for single-family home, even though they're below the acreage for new properties, right, in town, based on the age, whether they were originally part of a subdivision, which some of these were, et cetera. You guys have any input on that?
No.
No, okay. So, for next steps and timelines for this, I mean, I think we really should try to get the entire picture of these properties. So what would be our next steps
they were
regarding these
changed.
properties?
Highlighted ones, if they're yellow highlighted, that means that we changed them to 3, which
Yep.
means they were in our jurisdiction.
So what would be the next steps that we would wanna do? We wanna do a site visit first, okay, so we should probably make this list, right, a site visit.
Yes, I will make you a list.
What do we want to get property, I don't know, information on property values in the area, I mean, what are you thinking?
It's not my,
Some of them, we have to make sure that we have the actual, don't we, aren't there some that we need to actually make sure we have the original deed?
I think these we have the original deed on, are we missing a deed on these?
I thought there were 4 or 5 that needed follow-up.
Yeah.
Memory
Of these?
serves. I thought so.
no, but I
Alright.
thought you did that. Didn't you?
Unless you did it, yeah.
No, you asked, there was a couple that were pending.
Yeah, let's
and-
see what we have for deeds, so you think that we still are missing deeds? I feel like you may have gotten those though.
It wasn't that we were missing deeds, it was, some piece of it was, what needed follow-up or confirmation. And we're only talking about, how many properties are we
48
immediately talking about?
properties.
No, we're talking about 38 Milan Road,
Oh,
Yeah, it was like
okay.
5 of them.
we're
right?
talking about 1, 5, and 9 Brookwood Drive. Wasn't there another one, Tony, on Milan, or is that the only one?
That was my understanding, the only one, that there were 4 properties.
Okay.
Maybe you were going, I wrote something down.
So,
All right, we're hold on, so we've got,
Assessor report, were we gonna look or something?
I think we wanna make sure that these aren't protected wetlands, right?
Yeah.
That was number 1.
Yeah.
We need to do a site visit, so those are 2 things that we need to do. We need to, I would,
all right, here's, I have to open my folder from last meeting. So 38 Milan is 1.39, 1 Brookwood, 5 Brookwood, and 9 Brookwood, so there's 4 total properties.
Yep.
Restricted residential, okay.
mhm.
So no, I think these 4, we did check the deeds.
Right.
So I think maybe,
So what are our next steps to get the information necessary to be able to, make any type of recommendation? I mean, we need to obviously hear from the public, right, on what they would like to see happen, but I mean, the bottom line is the deed indicates when it was
yeah,
given to the town for that property to be used for a particular purpose.
yes, and these are the ones, some of these have that the specific language in regard to the bedrooms,
Mm-hmm.
the garage, all
That's
of that.
very
So
specific.
we
That's
have-
what it was.
That's what it was, I just had to open the right folder.
Yeah,
My
no, and I wrote a
apologies.
note here saying
I
specific
opened
language.
February's
Yeah.
Cupop
And I didn't know what I
folder,
meant by
figure
that.
out why I didn't know what I said.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, there's some of them, and I don't think it's all 4, I think it's 3 of the 4. It's the
Have very
Brooklyn, have that
specific
very
language.
specific, So we
Yes.
have to make sure we pull that language from the deed and we have that like easily accessible
Yeah.
while we're using, and also presenting to residents if we're opening up public comment, they should know the exact limiting language that's used in those deeds.
Right. So,
To your point on the wetlands, the preliminary finding of the Conservation Commission that the Brookwood Drive properties all have wetland soils.
mhm.
Say that again, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Tim.
The 3 Brookwood properties. Excuse me, the 3 Brookwood properties that are being
Check
discussed
right
all
now.
have wetland soils.
They all have wetland soils,
And that's-
so,
But
that's our,
But that
that's
doesn't
our finding.
preclude you from building, I mean,
Right.
that's the way it is, I think the whole neighborhood is wetlands, right?
Well,
There's, like,
I
certain
can't comment
levels.
whether the
Yeah,
whole
I don't-
neighborhood
yeah.
is wetlands. I think these were cut out because of the wetlands. And wetlands, there's certainly properties that go to be
Yeah, so-
buildable have to go through inland wetlands.
Inland wetlands, right, exactly,
So-
right, which Bruce is on, I think, right?
The disturbance of such on a small piece of property is a challenge, so.
Right. That's the one thing we gotta do too, inland wetlands too, because we have to check with them as well to make sure that that's not an issue.
Yeah, so 1 Brookwood is entirely wetlands, like
Okay.
the entire thing is wetlands. So that,
1 Brookwood?
yeah,
So that's,
that amounts to a constructive restriction
right, so that's.
on the
okay.
property. And I'll make a note in here.
That knocked one of them.
Wait, so then if that's the case, then is it still a category 3? Because doesn't that make it a restriction?
It's not an official restriction. I mean, it's a
It's still a
functional
category.
That's
restriction.
something for us to make
And it's
note
something that we
of.
should make a note of.
So,
It's an
That's-
environmental restriction.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a guideline that inland wetlands follows, where,
You,
but it's
you can build on wetlands, but there are certainly a lot of requirements and-
requirements that make
that
it.
you've got to fill. It can't be a majority of the property. The main dwelling has to be a certain amount of distance away from, the wetlands, so it's
Right.
there's a lot of
It's a
bureaucracy
practical
that goes into
restriction
that.
rather
Yeah.
than a
Yeah.
legal restriction.
What about, the other ones, was it?
5.
wait, I'm gonna have to make a note of that. So
5 Brookwood?
I have
That's not coming up for me.
5 Brookwood Drive, yeah.
5 and
That's interesting.
9. It's not coming up in your Cupop list?
No, on the town website, the GIS system, it's not. Oh, wait, I have to scroll down. There it is.
Oh, sorry.
Just
Yeah,
6:30
just
more?
Tim's.
6:30.
Yeah, that's
Yep,
the
same
time.
thing. Same thing for 5. It's 100% wetlands.
Okay, so move that up.
So 1 and 5 are done. And then 9.
9.
These are the properties, just so I'm clear, that had the single-family restriction on it, but they're still wetlands. Okay, got
So
it.
these are 4 that have specific single-family residential restrictions in the deed.
And I'm sure they were part of the original
There's a development.
development, yeah.
Right, whereas the other 48 properties have no
No restriction at all. Unless, of course, some may be wetlands again, right, things like that, and some will not be.
Although that might be one of our next steps, would probably be to do this then, right? While these don't have any restrictions, deeded restrictions or specific, but some of these may have environmental or logistical restrictions as well on that list of 48, so it might
Right,
be worth
Well-
determining that, because we may end up whittling it down to an even smaller list.
Right.
So I think that should be one of the steps, if that makes sense.
yeah, sure. How about yours plugging in?
So 9 is 1.83 acres.
Yeah.
A lot of it, I would say probably half of it is wetlands,
Uh-huh,
but the size of the property probably is buildable.
right,
Would probably allow, this, I obviously can't make that decision, so to
that's inland wetlands, yeah.
wetlands and TVZ.
But that's a viable property to look at?
It's possible,
Okay.
I'm gonna say it's possible.
Alright, that's 9, you said?
Correct.
Okay, like it's possible to build on the one piece and then leave the rest
Yeah.
undisturbed. Got it. Okay, I'll write that down.
It takes me to fire this thing up.
9.
Oh, you have that?
Yes.
You were mentioning, the 5 properties had a restriction and the rest don't, approximately 48,
So these 4,
yes, excuse me.
these 4 properties have the restriction for single-family residential, and the other 48 have no deeded restrictions.
We just own that.
Is that a reduced list from all the category 3? Because as I
Yes.
look at the category 3 on
Oh, yeah,
the
so.
main list.
Yes, so,
okay,
so
then-
there's some of these category 3 on our main list, which is the master list, yes, there's more than 48 properties, so on our last meet, we went through all of category 3 and removed the properties that don't have any restrictions, and that's 48 properties, plus these 4 which have a specific residential
Okay.
zoning restriction.
Okay.
I just made another tab so we had them all in one place, since it was
Yeah,
easier. You're right.
just the clarification, because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
knew
it is.
some of the other threes had other types of restrictions, so.
Exactly,
I
yeah,
just-
yeah,
I-
so we did.
And we left those, we're just
Yeah,
looking
yes.
at the,
Yeah,
Or-
there's it's a
Yeah.
sub-list at this point.
it's a sub-list.
Yes,
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's fine, I missed it, I should have known that, I was here.
So that would leave us with
It's
9
okay,
Brookwood
well.
Drive potentially.
All right, so this
Oh.
is 9.
Okay.
This right here is 9 Brookwood. So you
Okay.
can see here, everything in green is wetlands,
Yeah,
but there's a big chunk of this that could probably support some kind of a building.
and that's a house right there in the wetlands, right?
Well, the-
Where?
not
Where
in
do you
the
see-
green.
This is a house.
No, no, what's that up there?
This right here,
No, over to the left. Yeah,
this,
that, yeah, what is that?
that could be a retention
Oh,
basin.
okay, a retention basin, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Right, so they could put, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. So that would be an inland wetland
Yeah, so
situation.
all
that
of this
we
is
are-
possible, yeah, you'd be able to probably build, or
Yeah, and there's
it's
plenty of.
possible to build on that.
Especially the road is.
I mean, I know
right
people who live on properties
Well,
like that.
right, I know the wetlands,
Yeah.
my,
Me too.
Yeah.
my backyard butts up.
There are
against
houses on
it.
Pease Road that look just
Right.
like this, and the house is like
There,
right here,
Right,
so.
and there's houses off of John, like off
And
of
again,
Johnson like that.
that may be grandfathered in, you know,
Yeah.
from a long time ago, but I've seen that.
Okay.
around.
But that's a question again for inland wetlands to determine whether or
Yeah.
not that's even a possibility. So that's still a viable option,
Yep.
great. And then what about 38 Milan?
Milan,
Milan.
Mylan,
Milan?
Oh,
Milan,
here we go again.
Milan. I'm just gonna use all the variations for now on. It's a
Milan. We were corrected, Milan,
What do you
right?
say?
I said-
Milan.
Milan?
You say Milan?
See, I do too, but I think we were corrected. Someone told us Milan, right?
I grew
Everyone
up
that I've
in
met
being
that lives
Milan.
on Milan Road says for me to pronounce it Milan Road. So
Milan, then
Huh.
we pronounce it
We learn
Milan.
something new every day.
It's ad hoc, but.
All right, so how are we looking at this one?
So here we can go, make sure that we're looking at, and there
This is
are no wetlands
38?
here. This is
Okay.
38, yep, 38 Milan Road, no wetlands issues there.
All right, so it looks like out of this list of, with a restriction of a single-family home, 38 and 9 are the two that remain as possible viable properties for
And
single family.
38, it looks like the whole parcel.
Right. So our next step should be to actually physically go see it for a special meeting, right? Our next step should also be to talk to inland wetlands about, I mean, they're not gonna make a determination without
Greenway.
knowing the building and everything, right? But
Right.
just to see if it's even a possibility.
The green, where do you see green, this
Yeah. Is that
question?
like a path or something, a greenway path?
Is that a
We're-
path, Tim?
No,
The
no, those,
green lines
typically
are those.
those green lines are give me a chance to say something I wanted to tell you, Nicole. You know, when we had the prior discussion about recording easements, we were talking about easements of a certain type, pedestrian easements. You'll find a lot of these types of easements, which are drainage easements.
Oh, yeah.
All
Yeah.
throughout the town. So
Yeah.
we're not talking about recording those on the
Right.
Cupop list. It's
Right.
because those are,
So
there's
these are
just so many
drainage
of them.
easements, the green and the blue.
I don't know about you, Tim,
what-
every time I've tried to use this legend, it
I,
never gives me the color that's on the
no,
map.
I agree.
Ever.
It's been my experience.
no?
I've given up.
The color coding is really not.
I still love
Does-
legends.
Not applicable.
I don't know why, it's like a. Okay, so what
Doesn't
kind of?
line up.
No.
What kind of information do we want as a commission?
Swamp,
And
That could be a swamp,
yeah.
Wait,
maybe. It's a different dot,
no, but that dot, the line is different.
yeah.
No,
So there's nothing that resembles that in the legend.
usually, Javier, if you scroll a little bit, usually on those easements, someplace, and I think maybe on the very bottom, if you scroll it up, and maybe you have to drill in one more zoom, but usually there's a label that if you get really down, but maybe not on this one,
It goes all the way to Northrop.
yeah.
It's almost like a
Yeah.
path.
Most of them are
Yeah, it
labeled.
looks like a path.
A walking trail or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
but it ends on someone's
Yeah.
property.
No, well, it's no walking trail that I know of.
No, it's probably a drainage, I
But
bet.
it continues down here.
Yeah,
And
what
that's
what does that
drainage.
say? Right where your
30-foot
cursor is?
row.
Right of way.
R
Right of way.
Yeah, but that's some
Yeah.
kind of easement.
Electrical company or something, or something?
Is that the
water-
gas line?
maybe.
No,
Drainage.
runs along the river.
Right of way.
Drainage
Drainage.
right of
Drainage
way.
right away,
Drainage.
yeah,
Now, this follows a waterway though.
yes.
So, yep, it follows a waterway the whole way up here.
Yeah,
Yep.
because it pools up
Yeah,
there.
because
Yep.
the waterway is gonna have wetlands around it and,
So, yeah, that impacts a
and
very small part
it'll
of
be
it.
a low point, and that's
A
where
very
they
small
took the
piece.
drainage
Very
easements to
small
go down to a low point.
Okay, so getting back to my question, what do you think as a commission we should get information-wise about these properties that you would want to know to be able to make our decisions? I mean, we have the wetlands information, right? So we've gone through that. We'll question about 9. I can obviously reach out to inland wetlands, invite them to come, talk to us about whether that's even a potential for development. I mean, they can't answer the ultimate question because they have no idea if it even gets approved for development, right? Whether they'll approve that particular development until they have it in front of them. What else would we like to hear? Hear from, obviously we're gonna hear from the public, right? To hear about their neighborhood, you know, what in that.
But if this is single family residential, right? So
Which it is, yeah.
that's part of I think staying focused on these things. It's when we say development, it's not going to be
It's gonna be a
The only thing it could be
single-family
is a
home, which
single-family
what's
home,
needed.
right? Like,
Treated as a
that's-
single-family home. It's
so.
not a development, you're right, I shouldn't say
No,
development.
that's right, because we don't want people, when we're talking about their
Panicking.
neighborhoods, like, the only thing that could be put on 38 Milan Road, is a single-family home, right?
Right,
Because of what the
that's it.
deed says, so,
And same with 9 Brooklyn,
right, so then it would be
2 single-family houses.
correct. So the options for these pieces of property, as the town owns them,
And by the way, just keep in mind, this isn't one of these properties that are on our list of 48.
Right.
That don't have any
Anything,
deed
that's
restrictions.
what I'm saying.
This actually has a deed restriction that says, single-family home. And the
Right.
only reason why the town can't adhere to it on 1 or 5 is because of the wetland situation.
right, but 38
And
is one that
38
can
and
be.
9 are potentially to that, I mean, if that's how it was deeded to the town, it should be followed, the restriction.
And 9 is the one with very specific language, right? Good.
Yeah,
I
they
think
both, yes. 9 has the
9,
very
very
specific
specific.
language about the garage and the bedrooms,
Right.
etc.
Milan was very
More
Mylan was very general
Yeah.
and just said single-family home, if I recall correctly. But of course, we will have that specific language. We have it in the deed, so
Okay.
we can certainly pull that up.
So, in that vein, I think it's also important to recognize that another use of it is open space, right? So from a residential standpoint, you can put a single-family home according to the deed, but housing is not, right, the only use of the property. So we've got to recognize that in making our recommendation of potential uses, that it could be, you know, open space, I'm sure. The neighbors
Well, how
are
can
probably
you
gonna-
argue open space when the deed specifically restricts it for a
I'm
single
not
family?
arguing for open space, I'm saying we've got to recognize it as a potential use.
I haven't looked
I-
at these deeds, but I would imagine, well, depending on the language, you may be able to do other things with the property. Leaving the property
Right.
as is in fact, makes it open space, but putting that aside, the restriction may be written in such a way that says, well, if you build anything on here, it has to be a single-family
That's
home.
exactly what it is.
If you-
It doesn't say it
if-
has to be residential, it says
Right,
if you build.
right, it's
it
not
has to
committing,
be
Does it
this
say
stuff.
it's
if you
not
build?
committing
I
the-
thought it said deeded for single-family home. I didn't think there was an if language.
It says the only structure that can be, you know, erected on this property, whatever is,
yeah.
you know,
So
two-car
then
garage,
you,
whatever.
and this would, I'm not capable of answering this, I don't know if anyone in the room would feel capable of, but, could you think about, hey, this is, it's a 1.39 acre lot in this case, would it be nice for that neighborhood to have a little micro park? And if it's a micro park, what's in the park? Well, if I put a bench in there, have I violated, is that a structure? No, I don't, and the reasonable person would probably say no. So it gets into that type of discussion, so you can think of other uses that are not putting structures up, if they,
What if the adjacent property owner wanted to expand and buy the property, and
Right.
not build on it and put a gazebo? That's a structure, but it would be part of their property. It's
I
not,
thought it was
Well,
single
that-
family, that's what's completely, isn't it single
See,
family?
again, I think, in my view of our charge is not to recommend that this property be used for a specific purpose. I think ultimately, our recommendation should be to dispose of the property or not, right? And then, once it's disposed, the free market will decide what's gonna happen there. But I think our biggest decision or biggest recommendation to the board has to be whether or not to dispose of a property, because once you dispose of it, you lose control of it. So we can't say, we're gonna dispose of this property and put it on the open market in
Oh,
hopes
sure,
that
yeah.
it will be
Of course,
affordable housing, or in hopes that it will be a
Of course,
single
yeah.
family home, right?
right.
That's not, I don't think we should be making those specific recommendations. I think we should be just saying, do we
Well,
keep the
once,
property or not?
if we say we're disposing of it, let's say, I mean, you're right, we don't have control over it, the Board of Selectmen decides
Right.
whether or not they agree and wanna dispose of the property, and once they dispose of the property,
the single-family restriction would go with it, wouldn't
it
it?
would go
Right.
with it, and it would be,
Right.
so if they were
So,
going to
yeah.
develop on that property, let's say, it would be limited to the single-family
Yeah.
home. So that's a big difference than the property being disposed of and having the ability to build 25 units on the 1.38, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you're definitely limited to a single-family home and a single-family home.
Well, no, what I mean by that is that should be part, in my opinion, of the decision process. So while we own the property as a town, to Tim's point, like, do we wanna build a micro park? Is that not feasible? No, then that's why we recommend we dispose of it, but like,
Yeah, sure.
I think that should be part of our checklist, if you will, of, are there any other uses of the property that?
Right, but I feel
Could be
that when
viable.
we're giving this information to the Board of Selectmen, we should tell them, give them the information we
Oh,
gathered
of course,
in
yeah.
coming to our agreement, right? So whether it's input for conservation, input from the neighborhoods, input from inland wetlands, right? Like input from whatever, and then we can gather it all together, and then this is our decision, whether we dispose of it or not, right? And then that's it. I mean, it's up to the Board of Selectmen ultimately, we're just making recommendations, as to whether or not, as is, vacant, it's a usage that's helpful to the town. I mean, it's something that Woodbridge needs, or whatever the language is.
Yeah.
I'm not quoting my chart here, but, so I 100% agree with that.
So, is, just to clarify your statement, because on the recommendations of the Board of Selectmen on selling, because I am a little surprised to hear it phrased that way. So is this going to be, here's the list of properties you should sell now? Or is this,
We're doing it.
these are the list of properties that we don't see a valid use for, the potential use for other things, so you might want to,
Right,
these might be sellable.
So then.
Well, we
Nicole,
can
I wanna
recommend
answer-
disposition. We can recommend disposition.
Yeah,
So if we recommend disposition, I mean, we're not gonna give a list of 50 properties and say, sell them all, like that's not, we're gonna do it, you're not gonna be like, oh, sell them all. We're painstakingly going through each and every property in great detail, because we
Right.
want to ensure that everyone is heard from that has an interest in this particular piece. I'm not interested in being like a dictatorship here and saying, this is what, I wanna hear from everybody, and I think we all agree on that we wanna hear from everybody who has an interest in the property. So we're painstakingly, just like we did with the list, going through every deed, going through each property, and these are the easier ones that we decide to start with, because we're dealing with, this property that does have a restriction on it, that doesn't open up to a huge development, but rather, at most, if the recommendation were disposition, it's a single-family home, right? So it doesn't open us up to a, starting out with Woodbridge Country Club, for example, right?
Right.
That has nothing on it, that could be, anything, you know what I'm saying? So that's why this is, in our opinion, when we discussed it, the easier of the properties to start with, right? I mean, we've already knocked out a few because of wetland restrictions, right? So, that's where we're at, that's why we chose these. So to answer your question, which I think I'm answering, but I'm not 100% if I answer your question, No, we're not giving a list of 25 properties at once saying dispose away. That's not what we're doing. We're going to be going by each one, and it's gonna take a long time. And that's okay. But that's what we're gonna be doing in the process, okay? So that's why we're doing these first. Now, we're having conversations about what our next steps will be in trying to start that process of discussing 9 Brookwood and discussing, 38?
Mylan.
Mylan, and what the best way to do it. I suggest, and of course, correct me if you guys have an issue with it, but I suggest that we engage the Inland Wetlands Commission in regard to the property on Brookwood, because that is a property that does
Yes.
have a specific amount of wetlands on it. And whether or not that's even something that they would even take into consideration. Again, realizing and recognizing that they're not gonna give us a 100% answer, right, because they have to wait in here. And then, based on that, I know we wanna hear from the neighbors in the area. I know we wanna hear from, I'm sure Conservation will have a position on it. And anyone else that may have a position on that property. It could run the gamut. I mean, I don't know, maybe Recreation wants to, do something, I don't know, it could be anything. So I think that, in all fairness for everyone involved in town, that a notice goes out to everybody, and whomever's interested, agency, committee-wise, just like we were planning on doing when the country club was first and front and center initially, to ensure that everyone's heard and has the ability to come in, and we have all the information, right? We want as much information as possible to make this decision. I don't wanna have, one little tiny paragraph, 2 sentences to make a decision, or a recommendation. We're not making a decision, a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. So,
So how would that notice go out to the?
so we would send out, we were discussing, we would send out emails to all the, so for example, if we started with chairs and agency heads and things of that nature, we would send it out to the commission heads, like Tim would get it, Ralph Lee, whomever, head of, RAC, everybody. And then we would invite them. They don't have to come in person, I would say, right? They can come and present, submit paperwork or a report or something of that nature if they didn't wanna come. And get any input we can. If they wanna come, great, and then subsequently hear from the public. Obviously, it'll be a much shorter process than what we thought we were going to have to start with, so that was gonna be a while. And then, based on all of that fact-finding information and gathering, then we can discuss it as a commission and vote on a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. And again, to Javier's point, we don't tell the Board of Selectmen to do anything. We just make a recommendation, and if it's disposition, keep as open space, disposition, whatever the recommendation is, it's ultimately their decision. And if they were to decide, let's say it was disposition, we don't have any control, to Javier's point, as to what happens at that point. The only ultimate issue for us to determine is whether or not, this is the proper use of the property for the town of Woodbridge.
How would the public, like a neighbor, for example, find out that that's on the agenda to talk about it and for them to come in and weigh in?
We
would
could
that be
post it, we
posted?
could put it in the paper, we could put it in the
Okay.
email that goes out, right? Because we do an email, not a newsletter anymore.
So I'm just listening, and I always think of things in phases. That's just how my mind
Right.
works, right? So if I'm hearing you, just because logistically I know I'll probably be helping in some of these endeavors. So phase 1, October 11th, you're simply going to say to the Board of Selectmen, here are all the properties that we found, right? Just here's a highlight, a summary. In phase 2, you're going to focus first on these these properties that have these restrictions.
Well, we're doing it at the same time, but yes.
Oh, you are doing it?
Yeah, yeah.
So my question with that though is, are you planning to get your input before October 11th? That's what I'm
No.
confused. No, so you're just letting.
October 11th is just telling the Board of Selectmen, we finished the report, we finished our list.
Yeah.
We made some, corrections. These are the properties that don't have any restrictions that we're gonna review one by one to determine whether or not they're in the, best use for town of Woodbridge. And then that's it. That's all we're telling the town, the Board of Selectmen, that's it. In the meantime, to get the process moving, and to Javier's point at the last meeting, there's no reason why we can't start the process, right? I mean, we have 48 properties to get through.
Right.
So, and, you know, we're already making progress, knocking 2 off the list right here. So, you know, now, or, yeah, there's 4, so 2, and then we're left with 2. So now we're gonna start the process with this, right? And it's actually gonna be a more manageable and a smaller process, which is great, other than starting with a huge 154 acre property. And so the next phase will be, we're gonna get input from the inland wetlands, right?
On those 2 properties.
On the one, Milan isn't involved.
Just the one.
Just the one, because there is no wetlands on Milan.
Just
It's
the one.
Brookwood.
Oh, okay.
And then I would like to get input from inland wetlands, maybe invite, I guess it would be Christine Sullivan, right? Because she's on inland wetlands, right?
Right.
She's in charge, is she?
She's the town staff.
She's a town staff. I'll find out, who's in charge of inland wetlands, do you know?
Bob Blythe.
Okay, so I'll message.
Who is it?
Bob Blythe.
So I'll invite him to come, or perhaps if he can't come, you know, provide us some input regarding that particular area, if that's even a possibility to dispose, right? Maybe we can't even do that. And then, you know, we wanna do all these things at the same time, right, to try to get this information. And then I would say, what's the comfort level of the commission if we get this input from inland wetlands for our next meeting, right? And let's assume we have a special meeting in the interim and do a site visit to these 2 properties. We've done that. What else would you like to hear at the next meeting? Should we invite at that next meeting the other commissions and committees at that point in time to provide input? What are your thoughts? Kind of get the ball rolling?
Yeah,
Yeah?
not a bad idea.
Okay.
Do you feel that you'll be buttoned up enough to discuss those properties at that point?
Well, there's nothing I mean, we're getting input, right? So we don't have to have our answer, you know, or our
Yeah.
decision. We're just getting information.
It's not our decision anyway.
Yeah, it's
so-
not our decision, it's for our recommendation, for us to
That's
discuss.
what I
our
was gonna suggest, Nicole, instead of inviting them and having them come, you know, whatever, come to our meeting, can we just make, like, the reach out to inland wetlands? Can one of us take that away as homework, right? And then talk to the chair, or somebody on wetlands, and gather notes, the possibility of whether that would even be considered, and then bring that to the next meeting for action, rather than having them come to the meeting and, you know.
My only concern with that is a FOIA issue, is whether or not that should be done in a public setting.
I don't see it as a FOIA issue because we're just doing research on a property. It's the same thing as researching deeds, right? And we're not,
To a point, I
we're
mean,
not conducting business, like we're not
Right.
taking.
I mean,
a-
it's collecting information. After, I mean, that would be my
if he
interpretation, but I
provides
would
an
defer.
opinion on this, or the commission provides an opinion or something of that nature,
Well, they wouldn't be able to, like that takes
right,
the agencies,
right.
that's business of the agency,
Yeah,
right?
I see what you're saying, yeah.
So, because what I've envisioned this as kind of an informal fact-finding
Mhm.
mission, right? Is this even possible? Yeah, we'd have to look at it, then that's all. Once we
That's
get to
all I
that
need to
point,
hear, yeah.
then that's all I would need to hear to come back to you guys and say, I spoke to Bob Blythe or whoever it is, and said it's possible, but they'd have to look at it, and then we could,
It would depend on the development plan and
Yeah.
stuff like that, yeah, right.
and I just don't
Probably
want us
what
to
he's
get
gonna say.
bogged down in like inviting all these people to come and have a
Right.
hearing, right? I don't think that's in our best interest, given the number of properties we got.
So let's say you come back with the input from inland wetlands, and then I still wanna have discussion on these properties.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, should we have people here providing input if they have an issue, you know, cause the ultimate decision, right, is keeping it as is, or disposition, or using it for another purpose, right?
Yeah.
So, do we start getting that input at that meeting, just to get the ball rolling?
I think so, as long as we've got like a manageable list of properties, like if we're considering five properties, then we can issue notice of that.
Well, I'm just talking about these
Right.
two, I'm just talking about these two.
Yeah, but like, whatever the number is, right?
Right.
It can't be this long list of properties.
No,
right?
absolutely not, no, no, no.
But also at the same time, we don't wanna do them one by one, cause that
No.
would take forever.
Right.
So I think if we limit to, 2 to 5 properties and we issue notice and say, hey, look, Cupop is going to be considering these properties at the next meeting. If you have an interest or opinion or would like to issue public comment, please be at the next meeting or whatever. And that way we can solicit public opinion from the stakeholders, from the neighbors, of the public.
So
on a
like,
recurring basis for the
Right.
properties that we schedule.
I mean, some of these properties do have to be done one by one, but some of them are in groups of 10.
Yeah.
Like the theater lots that would have to be
Right.
done together, stuff like that.
Yeah,
So not to get ahead of ourselves, because I don't want to talk about the properties right now. So just focusing on these two properties. So we know we have two properties on our agenda. So do we just invite people for the next meeting? And I think we should.
I think we
yeah,
should.
see why not,
Yeah.
as long as we can give proper notice. Right.
Which, if we get it out, we can get proper notice.
So if we can't give proper notice, then,
Well, proper notice is how many hours in advance? I want to give more than the proper notice, okay? The proper notice is what, 72 hours
For
in
an,
advance?
for an agenda,
Mhm.
could be the 30, it's already a posted meeting, right? So
Right.
we could do the agenda the day before.
Right, which I don't want to do,
Right,
right?
but
I
I
want to give
think-
people proper notice, so
Right.
like we should do it next week, or this week, or
I,
next week.
I think proper notice meaning.
You want to give ample
communic-
notice, not proper, because proper is actually
Yeah.
shorter than ample.
yeah.
I think is what
I
you're
mean,
saying.
I
Good
think
point.
what you're thinking about is if you wanted to draft something, you had said that you wanted something to go to boards, commissions, agencies. So something needs to be drafted to go to them.
Just
So-
say Cupop's, like to Javier's point, keep it very short and simple. Cupop's, considering the usage of the following properties, if you have an interest or input regarding these two properties, our next meeting is on such and such a date at
Right.
such and such a time.
Right, so we just
Either
have-
pre-submit, or in the alternative, you may, attend and provide this input.
Yeah, so I mean, we could talk about the specifically, but you
Right.
probably were sort of draft something up, we'd get the list.
Yeah,
And email it. This is being sent on behalf of Cupop. I mean, I don't mind it coming from me, from my email, but, this is a notification
right,
from Cupop, right?
right.
And then discuss the list. And then if you, so I don't know what other information you want to include. Is there something we could put on the Cupop page in advance? I don't know.
We could put the notice of the meeting and the purpose of us,
Yeah.
discussing these two properties on our webpage as well, right? And
Yeah.
just
Be in our
whatever,
minutes
yeah,
too, in our minutes too.
in our minutes, and it'll be on that, and, we can put it if we could, I don't care where we put it, as long as people have notice, and the agencies and such. So next meeting, we can focus on the agencies, committees, and commissions, and then do we invite the public at the same meeting, or we do that for a later date? What are your, probably public later date, do you think? Because that could turn into, I guess, that could be a very long meeting. What do you think?
Depends on the property.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
think
really
it's
depends on
it's
the
hard.
property.
It could
It's
be
such
no
a.
one, or
It depends on the property, because it could be quick or it could.
I mean, nothing precludes us from continuing it, you know what I mean? So if we're here for too long, and there are a lot of people here to comment, I mean, if we can't get through all the comments, I mean, we can continue it, right, correct? I mean, is there anything that precludes us from doing that?
I don't think so.
Or are we trapped here for 8 hours?
We're
I
not
don't know,
gonna,
I
we're
don't
not
know
gonna be
enough
doing.
about that, because I mean, is it, it doesn't sound like it's a hearing, like,
Yeah.
like what Chris.
It's
other-
public comment, so
Right.
we can
Yes.
put the same,
And we give 'em a time
restrictions,
limit.
a time limit,
Yeah.
just like TPZ does and everybody else, and we could do that for public comment, and then send out the email to all the commission, we can just do it all in the next meeting.
yeah,
You
Let's
okay
try
with
it.
that? You guys okay with that? You okay
Yeah.
with that?
yeah.
Then how do you reach out to, how are you reaching out to the public, just so?
I would like to put it, well, it's gonna be on our agenda, it's gonna be on our website. How does TPZ reach out to the public? They put it on their agenda and their website and their minutes.
Does it go out in the email from the town?
Yeah, I was gonna say, or the newsletter.
Right. Well, the newsletter doesn't get mailed anymore.
Does it get mailed?
No, I know, but you.
The
But
email?
the electronic, right?
Yeah.
Because
We could put in the newsletter,
There is no, as we were just saying, there is no.
no, the electronic.
the electronic
electronic.
newsletter.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I don't,
But we still get that paper, that little,
That's,
what is that?
that's a private enterprise
Ah.
as opposed to the town.
So
Right.
the Woodbridge Town News is the newspaper that gets delivered to every household. There used to be that white newsletter that would come
Yeah.
from the town, and the actual physical copy of that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
It's just digital.
Yep.
So yeah, so
But I still get those emails, so I don't know if that's.
we could put in there. And then Beth, is that the one that Beth sends out?
that's from Beth.
Okay, we'll put in there. Right? I mean, I don't know how else we can notice. I mean, that's a lot of places.
I mean, I think we don't want to go overboard
I know.
with this as well,
No,
because
I
if,
don't.
if, let's say, we make a recommendation, and then the board says, yeah, we wanted to dispose of the property,
They're gonna have their own hearing.
then, right, there's gonna be
Yeah.
their
There's gonna
own
be their
opportunity
own
for
opportunity,
public
yeah.
comment and hearings or
Yeah.
whatever, so
Yeah.
I don't think
Right.
we need to do all that. I think we just need to offer the opportunity
Right.
for the public to
Bring it to the.
inform our recommendation, and I think that's sufficient.
That's sufficient. So I think, absolutely, I think that's sufficient. So do you think we do the newsletter or just leave it on our website? I mean, I don't care. I mean, the more, I'm fine with the more notice, the better, just to ensure that everybody's aware of what's going on. But I don't see where else we can notice. I mean, we've got to hit all the, we hit all the opportunities, right? Our website, our minutes, our agendas, and the newsletter. What else can we
Right,
say?
right. Truthfully, the only people would be the neighbors
Mhm.
of those properties.
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
remembering the process that, like, one of my neighbors requested a setback exception from ZBA. So I got a letter in the mail that said my neighbor was requesting an exception, that he was gonna be, the hearing was gonna be on such and such date, and I was able to,
Yeah.
attend the meeting, so.
But
like,
that would
all
be
those
Board of
processes-
Selectmen, yeah.
Yeah, all those processes are gonna play out
Right.
Yeah,
in the repurposing, if that happens, of a property.
that's right.
So I don't think we need to get into all that kind
Okay.
of notice. That's
Okay.
just my opinion.
Because we're only making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen,
Yeah.
so that's all on them, because they're gonna have to go through their process. They can't just dispose of the
Yeah.
property, or whatever. I mean, I'm not
They
saying
have
it
to
can be
figure it
disposed of,
out.
but they can't.
Yeah, that's a good way to put
Right.
it. They have to figure it out.
That's right, I think there also has to be a town meeting
There has to be a town meeting.
Yeah.
to dispose of any property that's over
Like the
$50,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a nice
Exactly.
touch. Town meeting.
So
But town meeting as in, that's town meeting as in vote, right?
It's gotta be noticed.
The town meeting.
Yeah.
But again, that's their issue, so we will just
Yeah.
go,
That doesn't apply to
yeah,
us.
does
Right.
not apply to
All right,
us,
so
so we will
let's-
just get it out there. So the bottom line is, Tony,
What-
minutes,
Yeah.
agenda,
And that's it?
I will write some kind of a short invitation to the commissions and committees and any agencies that may be involved, and we could just throw it in Beth's letter as well. And then that's pretty much the only places that we can post it. And then, of course, later on, this is for us to get our own information, and later on, depending on what our recommendation is, whatever our recommendation is, we're likely could do whatever they want once they get our recommendation. And then, they'll have to go through their process, which is much more involved than ours, because we're just a recommendation.
Right.
And so then for the October meeting, is that really basically all that will be on the agenda?
Yeah, I would
That's
say
the way
so.
you envision it?
Yeah, that's what I envision. Okay,
So, October 11th.
it's the Board of Selectmen.
Right, so for that, I need to enter the 48 properties into the Google map with pins,
Mhm.
right? And that, we're simply just presenting that. And then
Correct.
from there, after that, at our next meeting, we're gonna start looking at these two in particular properties.
Yeah, we're gonna start hearing from people,
Perfect.
okay? Now that we got through all that, any questions about that?
Well, the devil's in the details.
The devils are in the details, that's right,
Yep.
that's right.
Very much so.
Very much so. Okay. So, any other business that we have? I think we kind of have a lot on our plate, but, any other business that you can think of? Oh, I'll make announcements. Woodbridge Like Me Day is Saturday. It's from 9 to 2, am I right, Laura?
10 to 2.
11.
11 to 2.
2.
11 to 2.
Okay, sorry. I was adding a couple hours.
Yeah,
As well
11
as
to 2.
following the road race, which starts.
Following the road race, yes. I knew
And if it
something started.
rains, it's gonna be at the high school.
Great,
So-
okay. So I
Is it
encourage
supposed to rain?
everyone to go
What's that?
there.
Is it supposed to rain?
We don't know
Everyone
yet.
pray for sun. 'cause
No, it's not
would not be
supposed
fun
to
in
rain.
high
Sunny
school.
This weekend is
No.
supposed to be lovely.
Yeah,
Okay.
70s during the day on Saturday. It's going to be a lovely weekend.
Yes.
Fingers crossed.
So that's one thing I did not.
and Javier is the MC.
That's right.
Good luck.
I'm the MC.
Good for you.
Good for you. And then we don't have any public comment here, so we can skip over 8. Our next regular meeting, there was a typo. It will be October 23rd at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. And that will
Duly
be
noted.
here, obviously, for that input that we just discussed. And if there's nothing else, let's adjourn this meeting at 7:08 PM. So I need a motion.
Second.
Second.
All right, all in favor, let's do this. All right. Thank you, everybody.
May I conduct the survey?
Shining, and I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, and the dust clouds rolling, as the fog was lifting, a voice was chanting, this land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land